Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. So inshallah we're going to continue with the reading of Sunan al-Salihin wa Sunan al-Abidin للعلامة الشيخ الشاعر المؤدب المصنف أبو الوليد Sulaiman al-Bājī rahimahullah. So we're going to continue with this work by the great Andalusian scholar known as al-Bājī. Again, he lived at a time in Andalus that is a lot more complicated than what we think. And so I also picked this work for a reason, and that is we tend to fantasize about the time of Al-Andalus. And of course, it's a beautiful time, and many of us would probably rather be there than here. But it was not as the way that we imagine it, that everything was wonderful. And in fact, most of the time that the Muslims were in that part of the world, it was not only a lot of issues of fighting with the Christians, but even a lot of internal fighting. So there's a lot of political turmoil, and there was a lot of change going on. And for that reason, I find a lot of important commonality between that time and our time, which is also a time of, there's a lot of calamity, a lot of change, a lot of political instability. The world is changing. And what I find really touching about al-Bājī rahimahullah and others like him from his time, مثل Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi rahimahullah al-Mufassir, like there's a great scholar of tafsir also at the time who's known by Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi. And they both have something in common. So this work that we're going to, inshallah, we looked at yesterday and we'll look at again tonight, and similar to the work of tafsir by Ibn Juzay, they're celebrated for their intelligence and their genius and all these other things. But in addition to all that, they were also just fathers. They were fathers and they were concerned about their children. For me, it gives me an even added incentive to pay close attention to their work, because it's one thing to appreciate somebody for their genius. It's like appreciating an athlete for his athletic ability. MashaAllah, he can run this fast, he can jump this high, whatever. But the fact that he had all of this genius, all of this intelligence, all of this ni'am, all of these blessings that Allah Ta'ala gave him, and he decided to write a book for his two sons. It's a very rare thing. You don't find this with all of the ulama. You don't find this with all of the scholars. And so part of it was he saw what was happening in his time. There's a lot of uncertainty, and his concern beyond his own liqa'illah, beyond his own meeting with Allah Ta'ala, was what was going to happen to his children. He was very concerned about his two sons. And so he wrote this book essentially as instructions for them, in the same way that many say that at-tasheelu li'ulum at-tanzil li-Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi rahimahullah, like others say the great work of tafsir, even though it's actually small, by Ibn Juzay, they say actually this was also written in partial for his sons, because their sons were not necessarily guaranteed to have the same intellectual blessings that they had, the same temperament and so on. And so he knew as a father that he would have a mas'ula, he would have a responsibility towards his sons that Allah Ta'ala would ask him about. So that's kind of like the backstory of what it is here. And so when he continues by saying he gave some thana, some praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then he also gives some thana on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he says, وَأَشْهَدُ لِمُحَمَّدٍ نَبِيهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَصَفْوَتِهِ بِأَنَّهُ خَاتِمُ النَّبِيِّينَ وَالْمُرْسَلِينَ بَشِيرًا وَنَذِيرًا وَدَاعِيًا إِلَى اللَّهِ بِإِذْنِهِ وَسِرَاجًا مُنِيرًا. So he says about the Prophet ﷺ that indeed he bears witness that he is indeed the messenger of Allah, and that he is the select and the chosen one from him, and that he is indeed the seal of all the prophets and the messengers, and that he was sent as Bashiran wa Nadhiran. And this is actually a theme that will be reflected in the work. He was sent to give hope and good news to people, but also to warn them about the reality of the fire and the day of judgment. وَدَاعِيًا, and that he was also calling to Allah. That was also one of the main aspects of the risala, of the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, that he was calling people to Allah. بِإِذْنِهِ وَسِرَاجٍ مُنِيرًا, and that also he was a source of light and guidance for people. And so he wants his sons to know, well, who is the Prophet ﷺ? He wants them really to know about his qualities. And so he lists this for him when he says, وَأَنَّهُ بَلَغَ مَا أُرْسِلَ بِهِ وَنَصَحَ لِمَنْ أُرْسِلَ إِلَيْهِ, that the Prophet ﷺ, he fulfilled his mission by delivering the Quran, the message of the Quran, and that also وَنَصَحَ لِمَنْ أُرْسِلَ إِلَيْهِ, he also counseled anyone that was within, within earshot, so to speak. So the people of the Hijaz, in his lifetime, when he met people, he counseled them. And of course, the best counsel was the Book of Allah and what was of his Sunnah, alayhi salatu wasalam. وَحَذْرًا مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. And then he warned people, he cautioned people about how they lived their lives. وَحَدَّ عَلَى التَّقَلُّلِ مِنْ حُطَامِهَا. And he warned them not to be overwhelmed by the flashy little things in life, وَزُهَدْ فِيهَا, and rather to kind of be in the world, but not be of the world. We all have to live here, we all have to die here, we all have to work here, we all have things to do here on our journey back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but not to become so attached to the world. So وَزُهَدِ فِيهَا وَالرَّفْدِ لَهَا, and also to some extent to reject the world, meaning that you're not all about trying to get everything out of this life. وَبَيِّنَ وَجْهَ الصَّوَابِ فِي تَزَوُّدِ مِنْهَا, and that he taught people, more importantly, like how do you take your provision from this world. I don't know about you, I find these videos sometimes on YouTube or whatnot, and there's these kind of guys that they go out in the woods and they'll teach you, like with a club that you tear off of a tree and some branches, and you can make a mansion, or you can build an automobile, or you have these like they do these extraordinary things. And I love those because it's teaching people how to survive, like how to live well, how to survive in any environment. And so in that way, he mentions about the Prophet ﷺ, again, as what he wants his sons to know about the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, وَوَجْهَ الصَّوَابِ فِي تَزَوُّدِ مِنْهَا والاستعانة عليها وأرشد وبين أهل التقوى سبيل النجاة من شبهها. And so also the importance, obviously, of seeking right guidance, relying upon Allah Ta'ala, and also to be with the people of righteousness on the path, the sabil of najah. So ultimately you will be what? You will be saved from perishing in the fire. Again, this is what he was really hoping for his sons. وَحَدَّ عَلَيْهِمْ حُدُودًا يَنْتَوْنَهَا إِلَيْهَا, and also letting them know that there's limits to certain things in life. Don't go beyond the limits. So after he gives some thana ala nabi alayhi salatu, after some praise upon the Prophet, then he's going to open up in some ways to now the tarbiyah. He's going to instruct his kids. And so some of it is based upon أخرج الإمام مالك في موطئه رضي الله عنه, a hadith that's well known in the Muwatta of Imam Malik, in which the Prophet said, what? بعثت لأتمم حسن الأخلاق. وفي روايات كثيرة عن هذا الحديث. There's a lot of different narrations of this, but one of them that Imam Malik narrates is that the Prophet said, I was essentially sent to do nothing other than perfect good character. And so the fact that he was teaching people about Allahu Wahda, Allah is one, and he was teaching them about what Yawm al-Akhir, he was teaching them about the last day, and he was teaching all these things, and then he says about that itself is what Utimi Husnul Akhlaq. That is what good character is about. So for us, good character is not being nice. Right? This word we use today in English, nice, it's a very feckless word. It's a very insufficient word. To be mu'addib, right? To be a person of adab and akhlaq is to also believe in Allah Ta'ala wahda, and to believe in Muhammad and Nabiyyin alayhi salatu salam, and what all of the aspects of iman and so on. And so he begins with this, and then he says, Ya bunay, O my sons, وفقكم الله, may Allah Ta'ala give you success. فإني لما رأيت الوعظ من أدوية القلوب. I have seen, or I have discovered something I want to relate to you that in itself is a cure for the hearts, right? It's a remedy for the hearts. What it is? Al-Wa'ad, right? Al-Wa'ad, al-Maw'idah, or al-Wa'ad. This is a word that you will find in the Quran that essentially means to admonish or to warn people about, so that what they have an opportunity to rectify islah al-a'mal. They can rectify their character. They can rectify their mizan. They can rectify by turning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and making tawbah and so forth. So he says what? That the main thing I want you guys to know as my sons is that this book, this religion, and this Prophet ﷺ, at the very heart of it is maw'idah, is wa'ad. is رعاية الوعد من أدوية القلوب وآداب النفوس وتقدم من التواليف في الحديث والفقه والأصول والجدر وغير ذلك. And he says that here's the thing, even though I'm this big major scholar, he can't help but notice his own success. Yes, I'm a major scholar, and I've written all of these books, and I have, he's very famous for having actually defeated in an argument with Ibn Hazm, rahimahullah. So he's aware of his own success. And he said, all of these wonderful books by great scholars about fiqh, and about hadith, and about usul, and about this and this and this and this. The thing when it comes to wa'ad and correcting the soul and the adawayt al-qulub, the remedy of the heart, you're not going to find this in just these textbooks alone. So don't be impressed about that part about your father. He says, مِمَّا يَتَّصِلُ بِهِ مِنْ أَبْوَالِ الْعِلْمِ. Rather, you want to be connected to the sources of real knowledge. وَمَا رَجَوْتُ أَنْ نَظْرَهُمَا فِيهِ أَنْ تَسْتَعِينَ بِهِ عَلَى الْمُرَادِ لَكُمَا. However, my hope is that you will look into this book that I'm writing, and you will be able to aid and assist yourself as to what I wanted for you as your father, which is what? Right guidance, irshad. I want you to be rightly guided and to be good Muslims. رأيت أن أجمع لكما كتابا من هذا النوع وصلمه بعون الله من كثير مما يقع فيه من الألف في هذا الباب من الانحراف عن مذاهب أهل العلم. So he continues by saying, therefore, I have made this book for you. It's such a beautiful reminder. What do we do for our children? We do many things for our children. We send them off to college. We try to get them into the best schools. We do many things of the dunya for our children. But what do we really do to help secure the akhirah for our children? Do we rely upon the imam to do everything? Well, I got my own kid and my own worries. And so, as we would say, نحن في نفس السفينة. We're all in the same boat. So we have to actually work together on this versus looking to the ai*imma, right, the imams, to solve all the problems. So he says that I saw this, and so I put together this book for you, for his sons, specifically so that you would not deviate from the people of knowledge. So even though he's saying, like, look, you're not going to learn everything about being a good Muslim and a devout Muslim and a Muslim that Allah Ta'ala will love and you will love Allah only from the books of fiqh and usul and likewise. At the same time, though, I want you to be attached to the people of knowledge, not to, as he says, al-inhiraf an madahib al-ilm. I don't want you to deviate from the people of knowledge. وَغُلُوِّ الْخَارِجِ عَنْ سَبِيلِ أَهْلِ الْحَقِّ. Right, and therefore, without being attached to them, then you might be likely to fall into one form of extreme deviance or another. And of course, at his time, there were people that went into extremes in tazahud. People that, when we talk about zuhud, like to renounce from the world, there were people that went to extremes in this, and so al-Bājī was critical of them. He's like, this is not what Allah Ta'ala wants from us, and most importantly, since he's talking so much about the Prophet ﷺ, this is not what the Prophet ﷺ taught us in terms of to be pious. So be careful of deviating off into that, into extreme sects. يكون فيه تنبيه على معان لا توجد في كتب الفقهاء. And so you're going to find a great many things in here that deal with meaning and significance that will alert you to important things that you're not going to find only in the books, again, of the fuqaha, وَتَأْدِيبْ بِأَخْلَاقِ مَنْ سَلَفَ مِنَ الْعُلَمَاءِ. And so he said, rather, it's also going to be something that will discipline you, right? That will encourage you to be disciplined in terms, especially of your good character, so that you can follow the way of those who were the pious predecessors that came before us. So the main takeaway from tonight is think about what you're doing for yourself and your family for the next life. قُوا أَنفُسِكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. Allah Ta'ala has said what? Save yourself and your families from the fire. And so what I find so impressive about al-Bājī rahimahullah is that he reached, especially as a nerd, right? He reached an extreme height of accomplishment in those things that are very admirable, like fiqh, like usul, like tafsir, like all of this and that. But then at the end of his life, and he's having all of these accolades, he's like, man, I just need to leave something for my kids so they'll be rightly guided, so they will go to paradise. Because if my children fall into that, Allah yahdi man yasha, Allah guides whom He wills. But if my children fall into that due to my own negligence, then what do all of these accolades, what do they really mean? What do all the shiny things in life really mean? So it's a maw'idah indeed. The work in itself is a beautiful reminder for us to pursue excellence, pursue our careers, do all of those wonderful things, but don't sacrifice your children on the altar of modern life. Make sure that you give your children the time to instruct them. And as I've said many times before, the best way is to do it yourself. That's why the best guide, وَخَيْرُ الْهَدِي هَدِّ مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَى اللَّهُ تَعَالَى عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. Why is he the best guide? Because he is the one that not only talks, but walks. He doesn't simply just say this and this and then doesn't know. He actually, and he does it more than any of us can possibly do so. And so if you want your children to know the Quran, and there's a Quran class or a tafsir class or an Arabic class or any other class at the masjid or wherever, attend the class with your children. Don't just send your children there like it's a daycare. It's not the imam's responsibility. It's not the sheikh's responsibility. It is nobody's responsibility but yours. And again, the best way to demonstrate the importance of a thing is to do it with your kids. And I know it's hard. We all have to work a lot. But this is something that as we make our wasiyah, just in the way that we make a will and a plan for things to be executed, upon our demise, so that everybody gets what they're supposed to get in terms of our estate. In the same way, take some time to figure out a plan of what you are doing for yourself and for your kids, not just for this life, but inshallah for the next. So we'll continue reading this, inshallah, probably for the next week or so, as we enter into this part of the phase of Ramadan. وَالصَّلَوَاتُهُ وَالسَّلَامُهُ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ الْكَرِيمِ وَعَلَى آلِهِ وَأَصْحَابِهِ أَجْمَعِينَ.